Chucky Booker's latest news is the kind of story that makes you stop mid-scroll and think, wait, how did this man just disappear? This wasn't some one-hit wonder quietly fading away. This was a complete music machine who vanished because the industry couldn't control him before most people ever saw him on TV. Michael Jackson was calling him. Janet Jackson was trusting him to run one of the biggest tours of her career. R&B group Troop, they were building their legacy on the hits he crafted from scratch. And here's the twist. You'd think that with that kind of power, he'd be set for life in the spotlight. But Chucky didn't just step back. He walked away. No press conference, no farewell album, nothing. Why? The answer involves power, control, and a decision so rare in music history. You'll be wondering if he would have done the same. Before the public connected his face to the voice on Turn Away, Chucky Booker had already been shaping the sound of late 80s and early 90s R&B from behind the scenes. Music wasn't just something he stumbled into, it was in his DNA. Growing up in a household surrounded by instruments and working musicians, he learned early that music wasn't just notes, it was storytelling. By the time most kids were fumbling with their first cassette tapes, Chucky was mastering the keys, bass, guitar, drums, anything he could get his hands on. And here's the kicker, he didn't just play them, he made them talk to each other, building songs layer by layer until they felt alive. That kind of all-in-one talent, rare, doesn't even begin to cover it. His first major proving ground came with Troop. At the time, Troop wasn't just another R&B group. They were the full package. Tight harmonies, synchronized moves, and charisma for days. But behind their polished image and chart success was Chucky, quietly crafting the tracks that would define their sound. Spread My Wings wasn't just a song. It became a movement, a slow jam that owned radio stations and school dances alike. And his remake of the Jackson 5's, All I Do Is Think of You, didn't just update the original. It reimagined it with lush arrangements and heartfelt emotion, making it one of the era's definitive covers. Fans sang along. DJs were the records out. And Troop's reputation as R&B royalty, that was Chucky's blueprint in action. Most producers would have been satisfied riding that wave. But Chucky wasn't most producers. His next step was monumental. Janet Jackson tapped him to be her musical director for the Rhythm Nation World Tour. Now, let's be real. That's not a gig you hand to someone improving. That's Janet Jackson at the peak of her powers, saying, I trust you to make my music sound flawless for millions of fans around the globe. Chucky had to orchestrate live arrangements, lead the band, and ensure every single performance hit with the precision and energy that the Rhythm Nation name demanded. That's not just talent. That's leadership under extreme pressure. And then came a connection that would forever cement his place in music history. Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. These two weren't just producers. They were architects of an entire era, shaping the sound of legends. They saw in Chucky what few others did, an artist who could move seamlessly between instruments, styles, and roles. They brought him into rooms where the conversations weren't just about making hits, but about making history. One of those rooms, Michael Jackson's studio. While not all his contributions were publicly credited, insiders knew. And the whispers that he'd had a hand in moments connected to Whitney Houston, those weren't just gossip, they were part of a pattern. Chucky Booker's latest news during that time wasn't about chasing trends. It was about being in spaces where music's biggest moments were being crafted in real time. But Chucky wasn't content to stay in the background. In 1991, he stepped into the spotlight with Turn Away, a single that shot straight up the R&B charts. It was a perfect blend of groove, polish, and vocal delivery. Proof that he could dominate the front of the stage as easily as the control room. For many, this was the first time they connected the dots. The genius behind so many beloved songs was also a performer in his own right. But here's where the tension began. Chucky wasn't chasing fame for fame's sake. He was about the craft, not the clout. And in an industry increasingly obsessed with image, that made him a problem. By the early 90s, the music business was shifting. Labels were obsessed with personas they could control, whether it was the streetwise swagger of New Jack Swing or the glossy, choreographed glamour of pop R&B. If you weren't willing to mold yourself into a marketable character, you were a headache. Chucky wasn't going to bend. He wasn't going to water down his sound or pretend to be something he wasn't just to sell more units. That independence, it didn't just make executives nervous. It made them quietly hostile. When his second album, Nice and Wild, dropped in 1992, it was everything fans loved about him. Funky, soulful, musically intricate. But for the label, it was a marketing nightmare. No scandal to sell. No flashy persona to plaster on magazine covers. No easy hook for TV interviews. Instead of putting serious money behind it, they let it drift. No big promotional push. No tour blitz. Just there. The result? A brilliant record that never got its due. Not because of quality, but because it didn't fit the mold. From there, the calls slowed. The budget shrank. The The doors that once swung open started to close. And it wasn't because he lost his touch. It was because he refused to compromise. Chucky Booker's scandal update from that era wasn't about public meltdowns or messy breakups. It was about a man quietly standing his ground in a business that rewards conformity. By the mid-90s, Chucky had already secured financial stability. Royalties from his own work and publishing checks from hits he'd given to others meant he didn't need to scramble for the next gig. He built a home studio, collected vintage keyboards, and focused on projects that fueled his creativity, even if they never hit the public. This was the pivot point. He chose art over the constant grind of commercial relevance. The 2000s brought yet another transformation in the industry. Hip-hop had overtaken R&B on the charts, and when R&B did breakthrough, it leaned heavily into synthetic, radio-ready production. Producers became as famous as the artists, Timbaland, the Neptunes, Jermaine Dupri. They had brands, logos, and signature sounds. But Chucky, he didn't want to be a brand. He wanted to be a musician. And because he refused to chase the spotlight moved on. No versus battles. No nostalgia tours. No where are they now specials. And yet, his fingerprints were still everywhere. Younger producers sampled his grooves. Artists mimicked his arrangements without even realizing they were following his blueprint. His influence wasn't always credited, but it shaped the DNA of modern R&B. That's the thing about real artistry. It's not always loud, but it lasts. Today, Chucky Booker splits his time between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. No paparazzi, no constant Instagram updates. That's not by accident, it's by design. He still produces for select indie artists, mentors the next generation, and occasionally consults for major acts under strict NDAs. And yes, in true Chucky fashion, he still plays nearly every instrument on his projects himself. His net worth? Estimated between $1.50 and $2 million. That's not struggling artist money. That's work when I feel like it. Money. Publishing checks keep coming. Sync licensing deals dropping now and then. And he has the freedom to say no to anything that doesn't feel right. The truth is, Chucky Booker didn't fade away. He walked away. He saw an industry shifting toward branding over brilliance and decided not to play along. In a business where staying relevant is treated like life or death, that kind of exit is almost unheard of. And he did it without bitterness. No tell-all memoirs. No messy interviews. Just a quiet mic drop. And maybe that's why his story sticks. Because Chucky Booker's latest news isn't about a man desperate to reclaim the spotlight. It's about someone who realized his value wasn't tied to being in it. Chucky Booker's scandal update is proof that you can win on your own terms, even if it means walking away from the game entirely. The music industry might not reward quiet power, but true fans never forget it. So let's flip it to you. If you were in Chucky's position, would you have played their game for fame or walked away to protect your art? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you respect artists who choose integrity over image, hit like. And if you want to be here the next time we uncover a story of someone who left it all behind, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Because the next time Chucky surfaces, or the next time we dig into another legend's quiet revolution, you're going to want to hear it first.